All right, hello. It should be Wednesday, the 29th for you. I'm filming this like a week before, but unfortunately, I cannot be in the building today. I had some things to take care of. I'm sorry it had to be 2 days in a row. That was not my intention. But last lesson, we talked about themes, and you should have written some thematic statements on a piece of paper. Um, I think I left them out for the sub to pass back to you. If not, make sure that happens because you're going to need it this time around. So we were talking about making a simple thematic statement, but today we're thinking of taking a simple one and making it complex. So last class, let me move myself out of the way. Last class, we looked at one theme and added things to make it a thematic statement. And I would like you to include, if you've not already, please make your author and title of the book as part of your thematic statement. But that can be done during our work time today, if you've not done that already. But make sure that you do that because that'll be important for your essay when we get there. Today we're going to practice merging two different themes into a complex theme. Now, last time I floated the idea to you that you could actually merge topics together and say something about multiple of the topics at one time. Now, if you didn't do that, that is kind of where we're headed today. So, I told you I didn't have bel canto. For some reason, here is bel canto. I don't know why it was lost, but it has been found. So some of the topics I mentioned yesterday or would have been 2 days ago for you still apply. These are also some of the more specific ones if you were looking for them. Passion in the face of death, the strangeness of fate, basic human impulse towards civilization, love and relationships, art. If you had a different one, insert it there. So, for this, let's say I wanted to write a thematic statement about the strangeness of fate and love and relationships. Well, that's kind of unusual because those don't really seem to mesh. The truth is, though, is that a lot of times when authors are writing books, they are not thinking in single topic thematic statements, if that makes sense. They are bridging all of these things together to say, hey, this is a unique experience. I want to talk about this unique experience, and it contains these elements or these ideas or these like themed topics. So, for example, an author like Ann Patchett in Bel Canto says, fate has a strange way of bringing people together in love and relationships. It's a big aspect of the book, fate, this turn of fate that keeps all these people here. So, for example, I took the strangeness element of fate and I flipped the wording. I said, fate has a strange way. So I said, okay, now I'm setting this up. Fate is unusual in the aspect that it brings people together in terms of both love and other interpersonal relationships, which is the second aspect. So you're seeing how I just molded them together. Now you add in your author. In Bel Canto, Ann Patchett suggests that fate has a strange way of bringing people together in love and relationships. Easy as that. Now, if you're Bel Canto, please select one that is, unique to this. Please don't just pick mine. But this brings a new element. There's more to talk about with this. This is more of a debate. People could argue this happens, or like that fate does have a strange way of bringing people together. People could say, no, it's not fate, like it's something else, or whatever. But either way, as opposed to a more simple thematic statement, there is more substance here. And that is what you actually want out of your essay that is going to be about these complex thematic statements because you need substance to write about. Oftentimes people run out of things to write about and they say, well, I don't have enough to write for an essay. What am I going to finish with? The key to having enough to write about is making something complex enough to write about. This is complex. Let's look at another one. The namesake. So here's some ideas in the namesake. The Indian immigrant experience, specifically Bengali. Family tradition ritual. Independence, rebellion, and growing up. Naming and identity related to naming. Love, marriage, other ones that you might have chosen. Let's say I want to talk about family tradition and ritual, and I also want to talk about love and marriage. Those are kind of related anyway. So you're seeing that the ones that I'm picking are already sharing a kind of connection. For example, in Bel Canto, you could argue that fate and relationships have always been connected. Oh, we met by fate. We're star-crossed lovers. Oh, can you believe I just saw him on the street and I just knew that he was the one for me? He's my true love. Inherently related. You can build complex thematic statements off of ones that are not related on the surface. That is, of course, super interesting, super fun. But oftentimes when you mix and match these topics and ideas together, they already kind of have a common thread. And that's what you should be looking for, is this idea of a common thread. So let's say I combine these together. One's family and their traditions and rituals have a significant impact. Okay. If you were to use that for a simple thematic statement, that's perfectly fine. That's a great simple thematic statement. But we're not writing simple thematic statements because what more do you have to say? Of course they make a significant impact, right? I don't think anybody would deny the fact that the practices and rituals that we do in our own home do not have a significant impact on us. So let's read the second half on how individuals view the role of love in marriage. So now we're getting more specific. Specifically speaking, these ideas, these rituals and traditions that we engage in our household impact how we see love in marriage. Do I need to have a love match to be married? Is it okay to have an arranged marriage? Is it okay to not love your spouse in a way that is romantic? Is it okay to just love them platonically? You see how this opens up the avenues for a larger conversation? And it's a deeper philosophical conversation, kind of like with Costa questions. When you get up the levels in the Costa questions, it becomes less about right versus wrong and more about, well, to what degree is this right, or to what degree is this wrong? Because the true nature of a complex thematic statement is to show that life, or these topics, they are a spectrum of gray. There is no black and white answer. There is a complete spectrum of answers within it, because the human experience is inherently unique. So that's what you're really getting after, or what you're going to get after in this paper, is this idea of there is a lot to talk about when it comes to thematic stuff, especially complex thematic topics. And the more complex we get with our thematic statements, the more that there is to say about it, and the more kind of, I guess, confusing it gets, because as you start to get deeper, you start to realize there is no right or wrong answer. We could talk about this forever. I know, some of you would hate that. So remember, to finish out your thematic statement, your complex thematic statement, you need to put the author's name. Now notice that they put this one at the end. That's totally acceptable. There's many ways to do this correctly. So for example, young love. Let's take this one. Young people who fall in love often make rash decisions resulting in catastrophic consequences. So we took this idea of young love and we kind of mashed it with this idea of decision-making, consequences, aspects with maybe fate, but I think if they were going to choose fate, they would have to put the word fate or circumstance or chance in there. And we can see this would probably, adhere to Romeo and Juliet, where they say, oh, well, I don't care if our families hate each other, let's run off and get married. Well, and then that leads to the destruction of both them and their families. We could also talk about death and grief. While death is inevitable, grief is a related but entirely different thing that people process in unique ways. So this is handling two related concepts, death and grief. But this is a case where they're taking two things that are related, but they're actually subverting it and changing it to kind of reveal a new truth. I think a lot of people would say that death and grief are related. But what they're talking about is that, well, maybe grief is related to death, but it's entirely different. It can maybe exist outside of it, and it exists beyond death. So they're elaborating on this, just saying, yes, you're correct, but what if we add this aspect of it? People process it in unique ways beyond death. Like the funeral is kind of just the beginning of grief, is almost what they're saying. Or the actual death itself is the beginning of grief. Or the end in some cases, right? Because some people grieve before the actual death. So as you can see, many of these are, on the surface, very like, oh yeah, no duh. But the longer you think about it, the more you're like, hey, wait a second, there is something else going on here, and there's many ways that we can interpret this. And remember, as long as you can prove it with textual evidence, there's very few ways to prove you wrong. The only way to prove you wrong is if you said this and you didn't back it up with any facts. Either anecdotal, I'd avoid as much, especially in this type of paper, but textual specifically, like, where does this appear in the book? How do you know? How can you prove it? So that's really what you're getting after with this. So you should have your paper from last time. What I want you to do is take a few minutes with your group, try to change your simple thematic statements into complex ones. Mold them together if you've not already. And also add the author, add the book title. Write your complex thematic statement on your paper. Maybe have one or two, have a couple, because I promise not everybody's going to like the one that you made. That might not be interesting to them. And ultimately, we're trying to figure out what do we want to write about for the paper. So start thinking in your head, what is interesting about your book? And again, if you don't like your book, you need to find something that you hate less than everything else. Because the truth is there's going to be reading that we have all the time that we don't like. We have to find the thing, even if it's very minute, even if it's, I just hate this less than this, we have to find that. Because the only way, if you don't like English, to make it through English is to find things that do interest you in some regard. Because if you keep writing about things that you were entirely uninterested in or know nothing about, you're going to have a hard time writing particularly this essay. So start thinking of things that you're like, oh, death appears in this part of the book. Grief appears in this part of the book. The human experience appears in this part of the book. I know I can write about that. Then write about it. Do your complex thematic statements. I will be back next time, and we will review all this, and we're getting closer to the essay. Hopefully you have been liking your book. If you have not been liking your book, that's okay. Sometimes they're not for everybody. I just want to make sure that I don't have one last slide. Nope, it's discussion prep. So yeah, please do that. Put these papers maybe back up on the podium or just store them somewhere where I can access them. So that I can give them back to you when it comes time to actually start thinking about the essay. Okay. Canvas inbox me with any questions. I will hopefully see you Friday. Bye.